This is Raising Mama, a hilariously honest podcast dedicated to unveiling the hidden realities of motherhood.
Our goal is to arm you with the information and tools you need to be your most confident and empowered self.
This podcast is packed with unfiltered testimonies, diverse perspectives, and expert opinions, along with a good dose of laughter and tears.
Leading you on this journey is my best friend, Megan Stander, who is a CEO, passionate maternal health advocate, and mom of 2 daughters.
Alongside me is my best friend, Chelsea Ledson, who is a mother, wife, and registered nurse with her master's specializing in women's health. Let's try to raise the next generation
by raising up mamas
and maybe raising a little hell.
Today on the show, we have my sister, Julie Hughes, who is a military spouse, mom of 3, and has had experience of giving birth in 3 very different locations and cultures. She also has had a partial molar pregnancy and is now learning how to raise a child with inattentive type ADHD. She's a true veteran mom who has learned to adapt to anything and everything. Welcome to the show. So excited to begin.
Hey, Julie.
Hi, girls. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. So, Jules, you have given birth in 3 super different locations and cultures, and I kind of wanted to know from your point of view, what was some things that you thought were the best experiences that you had in different cultures, and some things you're like, oh, I wish that just never happens ever again.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I guess just a little backdrop with why I've had 3 completely different pregnancies in different locations is I am a military spouse. My husband's been active duty for 19 years. I met him 6 or 7 years into it. So my first pregnancy and birth was actually when we were stationed in Japan. And I got to experience the full Japanese birthing experience. And let me tell you, it couldn't be more different than it is here in the United States. I always joke with everybody that I think the only thing that was the same is the word push is pretty universal no matter where you are. So I knew what was going on in that moment. But my first birthing experience, the only people who spoke English in the entire vicinity of where I was birthing a child was my husband. And at the time, a hired doula that I was working with, who was another military spouse from our base. Other than that, the doctors, the midwives, the nurses, everybody just only spoke Japanese. And even the nonverbals can be a little bit difficult to translate because we all
did you have a translator?
No. So the option that I was given was in an emergency, you can call a phone number where a on-call translator could be available to you, maybe. So, we were just really in the weeds with it. I did have the option, military spouses that are delivering overseas on bases, they can travel to the nearest base hospital and deliver there. But for where we were stationed, which is basically considered the San Diego part of California, I was at the very southernmost part of Japan in an area called Nagasaki, Sasebo. And the closest hospital that you could deliver at was over 9 hours away. So the option is you either have to go up there and live in what's called the stork's nest. I can't remember how many weeks it was. It was 6 to 9 weeks before you deliver. And then you're just there. Or you just, go all authentic and deliver at a Japanese birthing center. So, my husband and I like to stick together, and I'm all for cultural experiences. So we went with the latter. So first pregnancy was delivered in a place called Murakami. It's a Japanese midwife birthing center. They do not practice any kind of epidurals or pain management in Japan, period. So you don't have a choice.
I did not know that.
Yeah, you don't have a choice outside of a natural birth in Japan. The only exception would be if you went up to the stork's nest to the military hospital 9 hours north, right? But that worked out for me anyways, because I was planning to go natural as much as possible and prepared for that. And yeah, so I could tell you much more about that experience if you want, but I'll jump right to the second one just so that you know my different births. Is my second one. We had then moved back to California, and I delivered. I really enjoyed my experience in Japan, and I delivered at a place called the Tree of Life, which was a natural birthing center actually in Lucadia, one of the smaller beach towns of San Diego. And that was another incredible experience. Thank goodness I did have people speaking English to me during that one, although that specific delivery was so rapid fire. There wasn't even time for anybody to talk anyways. I checked in at 7 and I walked out with an In-N-Out burger at 10 o'clock with my baby in my hand and went home. So that experience was as close to delivering in your own living room, I would say, as anything else. And in case of an emergency, the Tree of Life is like a 3-minute emergency drive to the full-fledged hospital that's up there. I can't remember if it's Sharps Memorial or Scripps, but one of the two. But I loved that birthing experience because the midwife who I got so lucky that she was the one that showed up that night. She's actually the owner that owns and operated and started the place. And she was such a vet. She actually established the labor and delivery center at 3 of the major hospitals in San Diego. And then as her retirement plan, decided to open up this birthing center. So she was a rock star. She was the kind of person who could like smell you and tell you exactly where your pregnancy was. She was a magician. And then my third pregnancy or my third delivery, unfortunately, COVID happened. And even when I was at Tree of Life, the owner, she was already getting older. And I think that COVID just kind of swallowed up what was her business at the time. And so I couldn't go back to Tree of Life. I had to look for other options. And I decided to go to one of the labor and delivery centers that she had established, which was the UCSD Labor and Delivery Center at Jacobs Medical in San Diego. It's in La Jolla. And that one is now, once again, a third completely different experience because the UCSD hospital is a traditional, American hospital. Now, why I got attracted to it is they have 2 floors, floor 9 and floor 10. Floor 9 is the natural birthing center, where they try to honor pretty much the way that I delivered at Tree of Life. Very similarly, let me move around. You can go into a bathtub. Everything goes at your own pace. You're not tied to anything, no beds, no anything like that. And you're just being monitored throughout. Whereas on the 10th floor, it's your traditional Western labor and delivery center where you can do epidurals and interventions and all the rest. So those are my 3 extremely different experiences. And I'm trying to remember your specific question. You asked if I had things
like
I would not do again.
Parts.
Okay.
Well, first question, were you on floor 9 or floor 10?
I was on floor 9. By my third baby, I pretty much knew what I was doing and what I was getting myself into. Although I will say every single time I'm going through it, I ask myself why I forgot, because our body has this like very great way of completely forgetting the reality of those few hours. But every time I've been just really grateful that I did go the natural way. But don't take that as I'm not a supporter of women doing whatever works best for them. I have best friends who have scheduled C-sections. I have friends that have done the emergency routes where you just kind of have to do it wherever, a car, thing like that. So it just was what worked right for me and for my husband and, everything. And I was lucky enough to have a stable enough pregnancy to go about it that route. So I was on floor 9. I did naturally for all 3. I think the only intervention type thing I did was maybe on the third one, I mixed a little castor oil into my eggs. Which was a tip. I know it's a tip off of a book that I read.
You're not supposed to do that.
Well, it's in, I'm trying to remember. It was one of my favorite books actually about natural birthing. I'll have to look it up and give you the information so you can put it in below. but he was the only baby that was not coming early, and all my other babies kept coming early. And I was like, I'm ready to be done with this, and I don't know if it was because of that, but I did go in labor within the next 24 hours. So.
Okay. So it sounds like you've got total Japan experience, kind of the more midwifery and birthing experience / home birth almost.
Yep.
And then you had the more Western traditional hospital experience, with a hint of midwifery, but all of them were natural. And I guess, so to me, the one that just like, whoa, is the Japanese experience. Like, was there anything significantly different from the Japanese experience, from the American experience? It just like,
yeah. So best and worst, part of the best part about delivering in a country like Japan, they have really got their priorities figured out when it comes to pregnancy and raising children. I mean, they have some of the best school systems in the world. And that same, top-notch priority is given to the mother throughout pregnancy and during delivery and throughout postpartum. So huge highlight of delivering in Japan was I got to experience that. So, for example, the 5 days after you give birth, you are required to stay at Murakami. Now, that might sound like terrible to people who are used to maybe a traditional
Staying
hospital.
in a hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. No, picture yourself in like a Hilton suite, okay? Giant queen beds, refrigerators. You have to bring your little charger adapters, but you have like mood lighting curtains. You have soft music, and like the environment is the most restful, respectful, comfortable thing you've ever been in. Family is welcome to even stay overnight with you if you want. It's done very much just like a hotel. But in the same vein, they will come and they'll do checks on you, checks on your baby. They're going to make sure that you're able to breastfeed. And because as new moms, you will be surprised to know it's not as easy as maybe one would think for something to be so natural. You do have to put some work and some thought into it. And there's certain strategies that really help. And that's part of what this whole motherhood community is, right? And they basically don't want you to leave until they know that mom is 100%. Not necessarily baby, but that mom is 100%. That could be cultural, and that also in Japan, when you get home, moms do most of the work as well. So you really do need to be up and moving and ready to go. But they feed you 5 meals a day. And you may get some strange nutrients in there that you're maybe not used to in your palate, but they will tell you eat that chicken liver because that is exactly what your body needs to recover from what you just went through. I try to bite. I'll leave it at that. I try to bite. I did my best. It's not my cup of tea. So maybe that's the worst part of of delivering in Japan is sometimes you have to eat food that you're like, oh, what is that? And is it still alive? But I really did enjoy it. And let's see. And then, of course, the obvious worst part is just that you're far away from all your immediate loved ones, your caretakers. So you're relying on...
Did you have anyone in your family other than your husband there with you?
Oh, no. And he was barely there because he couldn't get off the ship. So it was almost an experience that I almost completely had the baby just by myself with a bunch of Japanese midwives yelling around me. So that's what it felt like at the time. I was like, what world am I in right now? But they also told me I was like a miracle mom because Riley is my oldest, my girl. She was born sunny side up, and which means the back of her head kept hitting my pelvis and she wasn't coming out. She wasn't crowned down. But I went all animalistic, which I don't think that they're used to seeing either. And I put myself in some crazy upright positions, and they're trying to say like, lay down, sit down. And I'm like, I don't speak Japanese. And I just did it. And then afterwards you could hear the buzz for like 3 days. They were like, that's the one. She did that. So, yeah, I was, even in birth, I was the loud American, but that gotta just be authentic, and that apparently that's me.
You're a
That's
badass for
hilarious.
trying to give birth
Yeah.
in a whole other country or no, like that is true cultural immersion. So I feel like you win all the awards for that.
So I have a
Yeah.
question about the kind of midwife birthing center versus the midwife birthing center floor on the hospital. Like what
Okay.
because I wanted to do that. I wanted to do a midwife birthing center, but I had low platelets, and so I kind of did that kind of hospital route. Like it chose the doctor that would let me go natural no matter, like, basically no matter what, and
Right.
blah
Yep.
blah. But what, like, what were the key differences? And I'm assuming that birth number 2 was your favorite, not favorite child, but like favorite birth experience.
That's questionable, actually. I really enjoyed enjoy is such a weird word when you look back at it, but I really did kind of, I'm so thankful that I got all 3 experiences. The biggest difference between the second and the third, so the straight up tree of life, there is no hospital on the grounds experience, and then the UCSD midwife birth or natural birthing experience was the environment. UCSD feels like a hospital. It's very clean. It's very white. There are machines. There is a bed that goes, all of that. And if you're watching video, you'll see fun hand movements. But when we were at Tree of Life, it could have truly just, I said to them, like, I should have just done this at home. It was a real normal kind of queen bed. It was just a normal shower available that was on the side. There was like a little standalone claw tub that I could get into if I wanted. There was mood lighting with, I feel like I want to say salt rocks, kind of lighting going on. I don't know that there were any actual salt rocks in the room, but it felt like it, that very soothing vibe, right? You kind of were walking into a yoga studio and it feels that way. But they also gave us the choice at Tree of Life to be in the sun room or the moon room. And the sun room, they purposefully open up all the blinds and the shades, and they let a lot of natural light in. And then the moon room is much more like a yoga studio.
Wow, that's
I
cool.
went,
Moon room.
yeah, I went for moon room. I could definitely see the perks of the other one. But that is something that in no way whatsoever UCSD could
Replicate.
copy. There's machines beeping in the hallway. Everybody's dressed, in a uniform. Even the jargon, the speak and the talk is much more medical than it is familiar. So, as far as those little outside factors, that's something that made the experiences different. But other than that, oh, and the other plus when I did Tree of Life is the same people who took care of me all throughout my pregnancy are the ones that were there the night I delivered. Versus at UCSD, I think I saw a different midwife almost every checkup, and even at different locations around San Diego. And then I went and delivered with people that I had never seen before. So it's just an overall trusting of the UCSD staff, which obviously I researched and trusted with my life. But that's maybe an element that's a little different. There was a great camaraderie at the end. There was laughing, there were tears, there was hugs, there were pictures. And then even like going back, I think Chelsea at some point, I even brought you back and was like, you need to meet this team. These people are amazing. And they still knew me and they remembered me and they were excited to see my baby. UCSD, I haven't gone back since I delivered Jackson because I feel like they're running a business. Like they have to, do what they're doing. Not that Tree of Life was not running a business.
There's not that like personal element to it.
To me, that's how that felt. But then in the actual practice of what my body needed and what I went through, I would say they were identical. I had the Doppler, right? Because when you're not going labor and delivery style, you're not connected to any machines. So every once in a while, they have to come in with a Doppler to check the baby's heart rate, make sure everything is staying good, within healthy ranges. So both places did that. Both places would check my cervix. Both places would feel, look at me. They would take my vitals. They would do those things. All of those things were the same. It just was maybe the people and the actual physical environment that felt different.
So if you were to do it again, hypothetically,
Yeah,
home birth?
Child number 4.
Home
Magic wand.
Knock on wood, as of 3 days ago, this is no longer possible. So,
Whoa.
yes, I've been taking care of my husband who recently got the snip. So, yeah, baby number 3 is the end for us. But as far as if I were to do it again, I mean, Murakami in Japan all the way. And then maybe after that, honestly, probably just in my own house. Probably. Yeah. Because
3
if I
kids
could have,
and you're a master.
If I could have the tree of life people come into my house, like, I'm set. I'm fine. There's nothing you can really do besides that baby is just coming out.
As a person in the medical field, my last sort of question is, what do you think is a reasonable thing that a mom could do to make accommodations? Say her only option is the hospital, because I think most Western moms, that's their option.
Yeah.
What could they do to like accommodate the more Japanese mom-centered experience, or the Murakami vibe experience? Like, is there anything you think a mom could do if they wanted those experiences, but their only option is the hospital? Like, what do you think could empower those moms?
I would say lactation consultant. Get one lined up for after you have your newborn, because it can be very shocking for a brand new mom to go home and feel like they just have to figure this out themselves, or through YouTube videos or watching things. So, if you don't have a person with experience, like a best friend or a mom or an aunt or somebody who's going through it and knows, I think hiring a lactation consultant would be extremely helpful. I'm just gonna
add to that a lot of hospitals send one to you, but
as soon as you leave, request it.
It's like having one outside of your hospital.
Yeah, outside of your hospital in the coming days is very helpful. There's also like postpartum, I don't know their exact terminology, but it's the same concept as a doula, but for postpartum. And having them come in and check on you 3 days after, and then a week after, and then once more 2 weeks after. I think that that's really, really helpful, because things kind of come up and you want to feel confident in the decisions that you're making. And otherwise than that, honestly, if you have a really good partner, what the Murakami team did best was let mom recover. Okay. Like actually recover. So in those first few days, if somebody's able to take the baby for you just so that you can sleep, that was something, it freaked me out at first. I didn't realize they were doing it, but I woke up and my baby wasn't in the room. I was like, oh, what's happening? They literally like wanted me to get unbroken sleep. So they had timed themselves the next time the baby would need to nurse, and saw I was asleep and took the baby into their little, it's so cute, nursery. This little baby nursery center where they're all like loving on these kids at 2:00 in the morning. And I'm like sawing logs harder than I ever have. And then realizing that I just don't need to sleep with like worry or panic that it's only me that's watching that baby in those first few days was very a great mental load taken off. And I think that they feel that your nursing can be more successful if you're not stressed about that. If your sleep is better, your body can heal and recover better. And then if you could replicate maybe pre-planning some meals that are just going to be well balanced for yourself. And I'm just thinking what could replicate. Now, I completely think you can survive without all of this. But if you're going for that bougie experience, having this kind of support would be
survival,
nice. Like right.
I think it's not just about, we don't want to just survive our births. Like,
if you want to make it comfortable, have nutritious food, give yourself the ability for unpanicked, unworried filled sleep, and have somebody that's there to walk you through nursing, because it is your life for like very intensely for the next few weeks and months. those would be my 3 biggest tips. And then you're not going to believe this either, but
Oh my
they
God.
take you out of the room and they give you like a pedicure and or like just a foot massage and like a facial. So I don't know how many of us can all replicate that, but it was really nice.
Wow.
Yeah, they've got it really figured out.
Something that I think is very interesting that you said that the Japanese do is take the baby away to the nursery.
Mm-hmm.
And in medicine, if you want to work at a magnet hospital, so that's like Stanford, UCSF, top tier hospitals, the labor and delivery can't have nurseries. In fact, it will dock them to a lower graded hospital.
Wow.
Why?
Because some study by some person said that
the baby has to stay with
thrive better when they're with mom. But it's like, who wrote that study? I don't know. Was it a mom alone abroad where people don't speak English and they're trying, you know what I mean? It's like the holistic approach is probably not considered in how a corporation is trying to like meet a point on a spreadsheet so that Stanford can say, we're the top tier nursing thing.
It's only for like a couple days, and it's not. I mean, I'm sure that these Japanese birthing centers are well aware of skin to skin and all the important stuff. But it's like, I like the fact that by putting mom first, you really are putting baby first, because it makes no sense to like just. You're not going to be a good mom, and you're not going to be able to bond as well if you're just even just like a little bit more sleep is going to be that. It's more holistic. It's not as like rigid.
And it maybe brings back the concept of community. Like nobody is meant to raise an infant alone. And having that sense of community right off the bat and feeling like, oh, I'm not alone in this. It's really nice. So we joke and we learn from those times. There's sometimes we just fill up a little plastic bucket with hot water and put some salts in it. And like, we will massage each other's feet. It doesn't have to be fancy, but that's the same concept. You're doing just this tiny little thing that is so soothing, you know, and communal, and another person doing it for you kind of a thing. So it doesn't have to be expensive either. And I think it's just something that's just missed sometimes, a lot of times in Western culture.
Yeah. It's all about the mighty dollar, corporate, this quarter. It has nothing to do with the patients or even the babies, to be honest. So so here's my question though, for transition. All of your pregnancies were pretty natural. Like you said, if you were to choose your 4th baby's destination, you would do it at home. However, like, did you have experience anything? Like, we were talking to a few other moms that were like, oh yeah, I wanted this total natural birthing experience. But then they learned like something really requiring, like they were so grateful there was a NICU around because they needed a NICU.
Yeah.
Did you were all your babies like smooth sailing, or like how do you consider natural versus that like 1% chance that you really do need the NICU?
Yeah, you know, that was always on my mind and that's why I chose UCSD for my 3rd. Literally knowing that the emergency was 1 floor above, an elevator right up, was very calming to me, right? And I, at that point, had now lived back in the United States for 3 years. I'm losing my timeline, you know, so I had a little bit more immersion to sort of the advancements of Western, you know, society, and maybe some of the fear factor back in again and things like that too. But I did not have smooth sailing pregnancies. You know, we're going to talk about the Molar Pregnancy, but then also both my latter 2 had gestational diabetes. And I had to do gestational diabetes training through both of those. And, you know, the multiple times every single day, pricking my finger, which if you know me, I'm terrified of needles. It was the worst thing for me. And I love food. So it was like triple time the worst thing for me. But I went through gestational diabetes. I tried really hard to stay diet controlled, which took a lot of energy to do. And there was always that seed in the back of my mind that my body is showing it's not 100% kosher with what's happening inside of my body. And that being said too, I've always been a very big empath. Like I feel everything and I feel them very, very intensely. So when it was going on within my own body, I was just an emotional roller coaster. I think even when my husband proposed, my dad pulled him aside to say, like, just, you know, that Julie's a very emotional person, right? Like, are you prepared for that? And, you know, all that really comes out when you're pregnant, thanks to hormones and all those sorts of things. So to say that pregnancy was easy for me, not a chance. It's the hardest choice of having more kids was not necessarily facing that I would have to deliver again, but that I would have to go through pregnancy again. So that was always my thing. And I think that's maybe why come the third one, because your percentages go up every single time that you get gestational diabetes. It becomes more risky, things like that. I'm also getting older. So I did like the idea of having that backup option upstairs on that third one. So I don't think there's any problem with it. Like do what just makes you feel right. Because you can't imagine what you're going to be feeling 9 months from now.
What makes you feel safe? Like I can see that a hospital would make some people feel medically safe, but unsafe in other ways because they don't feel like they have the same autonomy and they don't have that kind of like salt lampy yoga studio ambiance.
Yeah, and you just kind of have to go with your gut, and it could be different every single time because you're a different person every single time when you go through it. So it's funny to say that I went the safer route my third one than my second, but that's just the place of life that I was at that time. So I think it could be, I might say right now I do it at home. I might get pregnant and be like, give me an epidural. I don't know. You know, it's just different every time. I never have my mind made up.
Gotcha. Well, so you briefly said partial molar pregnancy. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I don't know anything about this. So
okay, so this one's kind of intense. So I'll give a little trigger warning for people if the prospect of emergency D&C, which in other words is an abortion, if the prospect of losing a child or losing a pregnancy is triggering, maybe skip forward a few minutes into this podcast, because, you know, I can smile now because I feel very confident in the way my life has panned out. I do truly am one of those optimistic people who just thinks everything happens for a reason. But when I went through it, this was a very challenging time. At the time, I was still a very kind of, I'm a very type A, go-getter, control freak type person. I like conquering a lot of things all at one time. And I was approaching motherhood in the same way. I had my timelines. I wanted to have my babies 2 years apart.
So you hadn't had any kids yet?
I had Riley. So I had Riley, the Japanese pregnancy. I was still living in Japan. I lived there for 3 years. I was still living in Japan, and, you know, my timeline had come up where I just finished, and man, I was like textbook, which will come back up in some of my tips later to not be this way. But I am going to nurse until 1 year. So I nursed till 1 year, and then I am going to get pregnant and have a second child so that they're 2 years apart. All these like demands, right? And it was almost like I was being told, like, stop, you can't approach childhood and motherhood this way. So I did get pregnant. Everything was right on course. I did the cutesy little surprise thing. I was all excited for it. And I go into the same Japanese Murakami place, and all my checkups were in Japanese also. So there's a lot of like, the word that is ingrained in my brain forever is normal. If I heard normal, that means, all right, I'm doing what I got to be doing at this stage, whatever that is, but we're good. So, I go in for, I think it was 16 weeks. And in my second pregnancy, I was starting to already show because I was not, it wasn't my first. And I'm sitting there and, okay, here comes the triggering part, but they're doing the ultrasound, and the lady's pointing, and she's like, saying in Japanese, but 5 fingers, 5 toes. Oh, looks so good. Oh, here's a heartbeat, showing me heartbeat. And then all of a sudden she gets really quiet, and she starts kind of like looking around this one spot. And I'm here, I am, I'm videotaping the whole thing, you know, everything. And then next thing I know, there's a second doctor in there. And then all of a sudden there's a third doctor in there. And I realized the third doctor is like the doctor of Murakami, the one who at the very end of my last delivery, like stitched me up, you know, kind of a thing. So I'm like, okay, well, now what's going on? And now they're kind of talking really quickly with each other. It's all happening in Japanese in front of me. And I'm like looking at the screen. I'm like, wait, we just went over the fact that everything was fine. And then they tell me to like get on the phone. So I realize they're saying like, get that translator on the phone. And I'm like, oh, this is different. And I'm here at this appointment by myself. This is one of the struggles with being a military spouse. You do a lot by yourself. So I get on the phone and I talk to them and they hand it, and even things get lost in translation there. And to try to explain a molar pregnancy, a partial molar pregnancy, big difference from molar, over the phone in Japanese. Thank God for the internet, because I could not understand what was going on. What it is your baby is growing fine, but your placenta is growing extra cells and cysts, and they have a very, very high probability of being cancerous. And the problem is, if the cancer doesn't kill you, the actual cysts will, because they grow at such a rapid rate that they, trigger warning, explode your placenta inside of you, which then kills you and your baby. So there is no option in a partial molar pregnancy other than to terminate the pregnancy. And I researched the hell out of it. You better believe me. I went home that day and I was like, there's gotta be one study somewhere where a person took a partial molar pregnancy to term. Turns out there is one. And it was in a third world country. And it was basically by whatever you believe in, you know, the universe, the grace of God, all those kinds of things, that this lady survived this pregnancy because they delivered a placenta that was ready to explode, essentially. So the risk just is not there. So you really, choice gets taken out of the situation. And then you're just left with having to know that you're going to be going in, not by your choice, to go terminate a pregnancy that you thought was completely viable and happening, and that you actually saw the heartbeat that same day. So,
wow.
Yeah. So then we did, I think I had the weekend. They said, take the weekend. And my appointment was on a Friday. I went in on Monday to their actual hospital, a different place than the delivery, the midwife. This is their hospital. And, yeah, from what I know, because I don't know too much of Western, practices for D&C, but I think my guess is it was very similar. I went under, and I woke up and I wasn't pregnant anymore. And the hard
You
part
went
about
under.
Yeah, I
all
did.
the way.
All
Anesthesia.
the way. Yep. And then the most annoying part of it, if it's not traumatic enough to just go through that process, you then have to go in the beginning once every week, and then after that once every 2 weeks, to get your blood drawn and tested for a year, to make sure your HCG levels drop down to 0, because there is a chance that the cells spread other places than just the placenta that they removed. And if it does, it's kind of like, I don't know, what's something that grows a lot, mushrooms, they just spread everywhere. So they're trying to make sure that cancer is not a part of it. They're trying to make sure that they got everything. And that's literally the words they use. We needed to make sure we got everything out. And I'm like, you are talking about a baby that was growing inside of me, not just get everything out. So that was maybe the hardest part of a partial molar pregnancy, was having to be reminded about it every few weeks. And then also be reminded that I couldn't try to have another baby until that year was done and they gave me the clear, because I would just be not putting the baby into a safe environment, essentially. And what else? Yeah, it was a lot to kind of go through, and that would put everything into perspective for me of like, wow, this is not in my control at all. Like I had time for me to just, embrace where this is, and roll with the punches versus trying to play out what I had pictured in my head.
How did you get through that? Like, especially being a military spouse, how did you, because I mean, that is postpartum as well,
Oh
Mhm.
you
yeah,
know?
yeah, oh yeah. Your hormones go from being fully pregnant to completely not pregnant. And you get cramps and your breasts hurt and all those kinds of things happen. How I got through it is I had Riley. I had another child to take care of. You can only think about and dwell on yourself for so long when you have another human to take care of. And I didn't have family around, so nobody else was going to do it for me. And when it's your first child in their first year, you don't trust a whole lot of people, to take care of her. There's kind of that wall to get over. So it was just sort of she and I, duking it out. There were a lot of big nights of cuddling my dog Lucy at that time, who was,
Mhm.
has passed since, but she was my little empath, soother dog. And then I just made myself get busy. So I did go through, and I was going to bring this up maybe a little later, but now seems fitting. I did experience difficult postpartum after having Riley, and it was tied
Mm.
up with some of this Molar pregnancy stuff. It was tied up with the transition to becoming a military spouse and living in Japan and living all by myself and all of that. But I definitely experienced depression
What do you
for the
mean by, okay, that's what I was gonna say. What do
I
you
was
mean by
experiencing
difficult?
depression for not the first time, but at a stronger level than I'd experienced before, and
Mm.
anxiety and things like that. I had a full-time working career, and then we moved to Japan, and that was gone. And now all of a sudden I was a mom, and that was new. And now all of a sudden I'm part of this military community, which I had no exposure to in my entire life prior to meeting my husband. He's in the Navy. I used to call all military the Army. So that's how far off I was from understanding, the nuances of military life. And so I did seek professional help, and I went to a therapist through the base. And I did make like even a note to myself, because it's easy to forget a lot of things when you have as much going on in my world. 3 kids, they make you forget everything. But basically, the biggest tip he told me, we created this whole health outline plan. Here's the best way to stay healthy in mind, body, and, spiritually. And these are the actions you need to take. And I was just in such a place. I was doing the bare minimum to take care of Riley, because there's something that just doesn't stop you from doing that. But then all the rest was like, no, not happening. So then he said, well, what moves you? And I said, you know, I feel like I don't ever want anybody to ever see me like that. So
Mm.
the way people see me moves me, because I will get up for them. But here there is nobody to see me. So why
Mm.
do I have to do that? He goes, okay, go out there and fake it till you make it. That's what he told me to do. Go out there, find people to put yourself in front of, and go fake it. You don't have to believe in it. You don't have to feel it. You don't have to any of this stuff. Just go out there, stand up, talk to people, and pretend like everything is the way that we wrote it on this piece of paper, the way your ideal way is for things to be, the way you felt things were before you felt this way. And just go out there and fake it. And over time, let's see if you can make it. And it was just the best advice anybody had ever given me. It was the hardest thing to sign up. I signed up for a thing called Stroller Warriors, which was a little stroller running club with moms, which in my mind sounded so what's the word? Hypocrisy.
Unattainable.
No, like almost like exactly what's expected of a mom, right? Oh, now I'm going to join a mom group and do all of that.
Prototype.
Totally. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I need to go out there and join a mom group. So I joined the Stroller Warriors. Did I feel like exercising? No, like not at all. I wanted to watch Netflix and sit there and wallow and do my nothingness forever. But I got there, I met this group, I showed up to it 3-4 times a week. Sometimes I hated it, sometimes I loved it. 90% of the times I was faking it. But these people loved me because I could really turn on when I was in front of them. And then all of a sudden, it almost felt like now I was going because I wanted to go, not because I felt like it was my prescription to go. And And all of a sudden the cloud lifted, and I made it, essentially. And I was able to kind of get out of that place. So that was a
That's
big
like,
part of coping.
first hearing that advice, I was like, oh boy, that is scary advice to give. But I'm just trying to get inside their head and like the strategy there. It was probably that, well, you're not going to get better staying home and doing nothing. I mean, I'm very like careful saying that, because I think that, you know, medication is definitely sometimes needed, but probably based on his assessment of you,
Oh yeah.
you know, he was like, this is going to be what motivates her.
I mean, every person is so different, and I am such a social being. And to
Right.
now all of a sudden see that I'm stripped and in this place that I had no social network, it probably was so blaringly obvious to him,
Right.
to Dr. Peachy. But I'm grateful for it, because, he made me feel peachy. No. It worked for me. It worked for me. And it's not to say that I haven't had my waves, but I have all my notes, and I go back to it and I say, okay, these are the practices that help you. So if you don't feel like doing it, just fake it. Just try it anyways. So
I like it.
What's
I
your
mean,
hesitancy, Megan? I see your hesitancy. You're like,
I hate faking it. Like I'm like a social introvert. So like if I am in a situation where I have social anxiety, which is basically anytime I'm around anyone I don't know, God only knows why I'm doing a podcast. I need time to I need time away to like recharge. And because faking it is like so exhausting to me.
Oh yeah.
But I get it. I mean, it's so easy to isolate. I'm trying to get it. It's so easy to isolate. And it's true. Like I posted something about this the other day. But like one thing I do if I'm feeling, because I also have a certain level of anxiety and depression that like I've just had my whole life basically. And whenever I'm feeling shitty and I just need that time to like cave out, and I just, even if it's for an hour, because Lord knows I don't have time to cave out for very long with 2 kids, but I lie in bed in the dark, but I always open my window so I can see outside.
Yeah.
And it really helps give perspective, because I'm like, there's people in those houses. You know what I mean? There's a world out there. And it helps. And like, even just getting outside and going to the grocery store, like I'm reminded of like, it gives you like, when you're in a hole, you're like an inch from the ground. And maybe it's going to take you a while to get like 10,000 feet and really see things. But like going outside at least gets you like 10 feet. And you're like, you're a little bit more removed. And so I'm thinking that's like what happened.
I
with
think
you,
mental
other
health is
than
just
forging.
Yeah.
Sorry, other than forging those connections.
Yeah, mental health is just it is such a unique per person thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think maybe if there's a nugget to be taken from that is that I went and I sought help, right? It's not necessarily the help that he gave me, but that I recognized it and I said, this isn't the kind of mom I want to be. So how am I going to handle this? How am I going to take care of it? I couldn't lean on my husband a whole lot at the time because he was gone. Thing about being overseas, they call it forward deployed, which sounds nice because they're supposed to be able to come home to bed every single night. But essentially it just means like a 3-year deployment. They are on call all the time, the whole time, because the ship that would traditionally go on a 9-month deployment to get to a destination and back is at its destination and operating. So it was a very long 3 years. It was a very hard 3 years, and having the partial molar and my first baby in those 3 years, I mean, you learn a lot about yourself, and then you realize how resilient you can be as well. And I think just trying to accept that both things happen. You can feel lost and you can feel triumphant, all in the same, body, in the same person. And to just believe in that ability in ourselves is a big part of what just gets me through. And then not to be afraid to ask for help, just
Yeah.
do it.
Man, I feel like we've covered so much. We've covered the different ways to give birth, what a partial molar pregnancy is, even gestational diabetes, it seems like a pretty solid pattern now that there's this like transition identity crisis that happens in motherhood, and just the various ways people get through it, and how it seems also too like a pretty good theme here is like resources help people a lot, whether it is seeing the therapist, the lactation consultant, or like having that partner. But it's just something that every single person we've interviewed, they're like, yeah, get some help. And maybe the way that you get the help is different for each person, just like the way you give birth is going to be different each time.
If I
feel like
could,
now, go ahead. Yeah.
If I could, I kind of want to touch on that, because where we are to this point in the conversation and kind of where I want to end the conversation is actually it seems like two sides of a coin. Okay. And bear with me for this. Yes, I think that the research and the support and all the resources, they're so huge and they're so helpful. But as I have now grown, as we've mentioned many times now, I have 3 kids. They're 7, 4, and 2 years old. The oldest having an attentive type ADHD, which we might get to. But there's been so much to learn in that amount of time that I learned to start using these resources and these support things as guidelines, not as methods to try to control. Because I was, especially with my first postpartum experience in that first year with Riley, having been kind of literally cast on an island to figure it out, I was only referencing the books. I was only referencing all the advice. I was only referencing all these all the statistics show this. This sleep it out cry method is the way you do it. You nurse this much at this amount at this period of time. These are the wake periods. If you go back in there, your kid will never fall asleep again because you're breaking the sleep training method and all this crazy stuff. And it did a lot of disservice to me as well, because I was trying to hold myself to a standard that is literally, they're trying to find perfect methods for you. And the reality is kids are just tiny little human beings. They're as messed up as we are. They're as versatile as we are, Have you ever had a night where you sleep perfectly every single night? No, because humans don't. And babies are the same way. So what need they have can change on a day-to-day basis, on a minute-to-minute basis. So as much as I leaned into all of those resources, and I do highly advocate that you do, take it with a grain of salt that you need to then relinquish control. Use it as a guideline and look at your actual child and then listen to your inner self and follow that. At the end of the day, when you've tried all the methods and you've done all the things and you're like, why did this work yesterday and it's not working today? And, what am I missing? For me, the part that was missing was to sit down and shut out all the noise and look at my kid and be like, what do you need? What do I need? And go in on each other. And then all of a sudden it was boom. So come my third child, I haven't opened up a book once, I haven't, because maybe I have a wealth of knowledge from the previous times, but truly I just feel like he tells me what he needs and I'm way better at listening to him than I was before. I didn't have the trust in myself before. And now that I do, I'm yeah, this is against all the books. This isn't what anything tells you to do, but look how happy my kid is. You see that. And that's something that really does change. And I just want to make sure that I am both sides of that coin.
I think that really resonates with me. And all 3 of us, I know you a little bit outside of, Chelsea's my best friend. So I've known you for a while. And I think all of us have that, we like planning, we like control, and I think that for me, that was the biggest thing, that when I had kids, I had to just relinquish control. And
totally.
It's funny. I feel like I almost went too far because, like,
Mm-hmm. It happened. Yeah.
I will be like Zen mama when things are just crazy. But
Yeah.
it's like you will drive yourself absolutely insane, like
I feel
trying
like
to.
that does happen. I just recently reminded myself of my research on the 4 different parenting styles, right? There's neglect, permissive, authoritarian, and what's the fourth one?
Authoritative.
Authoritative. And the 4 different styles. And I had realized I had rebounded all the way from authoritative all the way into permissive. So we're going from like one extreme to the other. And I was living there because it was like healing relationships. And there was reasons why I needed to be there. But then I got stagnant. And all of a sudden it wasn't serving my family anymore. It's like, no,
Right.
this is not what needs to happen anymore. We need to like course correct and maybe dive into one of those other styles. And I think maybe that is just it, is like, since we're evolving beings, since we're evolving moms, kids, all that kind of stuff, we have to be able to roll with the punches. We have to be able to, be flexible. And for those of us kind of control freaks, it's like the scariest adventure to be on, but you learn so much by doing it. You're like,
Yes.
huh. So this reminds me of a time when I called Chelsea, actually. So I don't think we announced in the beginning, Chelsea is my sister. Chelsea is my sister. If you haven't caught on at this point. But I called her because even though she's my younger sister, she has always been very independently minded and very confident. And she functions like an older sister for me at many times. I'm the emotional one, very emotional. She's very steady Eddie. So I called
She's
her
like
up and
that for me too.
Yes, you got to love having somebody like that in your life,
Yeah.
We keep things interesting. She keeps things real. So I called her because I'm in this new neighborhood. We move every 2 to 3 years in the military, and all these 8-year-olds, kind of 8 to 10-year-olds, play out front by themselves unsupervised. And it's hard for me to watch as a new mom. And I always joke that I'm a recovering helicopter parent because you're never fully recovered. You're always just working on it all the time. And I said, my oldest wants to go out there. She was like 6, almost turning 7 at the time. I'm like, but, we know she struggles with behavior things and emotional regulation and all these things. So I don't know if I like let her out there to the wolves, they're going to put all these impressions on her. Sometimes they're roughhousing way too hard. Sometimes they're using bad language. Sometimes they're out there making mistakes, or shoot, God forbid, like taking a tree branch and hitting something they shouldn't be doing, And Chelsea's like, and this was when I was still very much in like my mama bear phase. I think had just had the newborn, and I have a newborn. I have a 3-year-old. I have my 6 going on 7-year-old. And I'm like, I'm drowning in my little den trying to keep everybody contained. And she's like, let her out there. Like, yeah, but then I'm going to deal with a lot of backlash. And the idea was that Chelsea was very good to put at me or bring to my attention. She's like, if you don't let her go out there and make natural mistakes, she won't learn natural consequences from other people. And people who grow up like that grow up completely dependent on others to take care of them because they don't know how to function without somebody else holding their hand through it. And if you let her go out there, she's going to get all these coping mechanisms. Sure, maybe the kids don't like her because she exploded on them. Well, now she knows what that feels like, and maybe she'll learn herself, don't explode on kids, or things like that. And it brought it into this, like, you don't have to be responsible for every single little thing that happens for them. They can go out there and they cannot be liked, or they can make the mistake, or they can learn that bad word. But then the world, the community we live in, has a way of like bringing that back into a learning lesson, even for the child. And I feel like that's kind of the approach that now I've been bringing to all my parenting, is I've taken a step back to be more of a let them blossom for who they are. Don't shield them from everything, but be there for them as they're trying to navigate it all. So I can't specifically remember what brought me into that conversation, but it has to go into some of the like eye-opening things I've experienced through going through postpartum and relinquishing control. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing from this is the wisdom of having not 1 kid, not 2 kids, but 3 kids. And the transition is to have a little bit more belief in yourself, not solely just go off of the experts, and to have a little bit more faith and belief in your kids, and to be more okay with the unknown. is sort of the words of wisdom I was hearing from your like transition of recovering helicopter
Yeah.
mama.
Yeah, yeah, it's not easy for certain personality types, and um but it's worth it because you'll watch while your kids grow. You'll watch the burden from yourself lessen, and you'll watch them blossom. So, you could either kill yourself by continuously trying to hit all these perfect marks all the time, or you can live in reality where none of us live in a bubble like that. That's crazy,
Well, I feel like the perfect mark that you are hitting is not actual perfection, but it's just that you're a good mother in the sense that you you've got a lot of self-reflection and you're changing courses. I mean, it's hard to just know always what to do. You're going to make mistakes, but like the real commitment to motherhood is like growing, changing, adapting, learning about yourself, learning about your own childhood and your own everything, and like becoming a better person. And like it's just that is what makes a good mom. It's not like about doing it right all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I reflected on what has been the hardest part of motherhood. And like I said, I want to get my words right because it's important to me. But one of the biggest challenges is in regards to that adapting part. We all have a certain personality. We're all made up a certain way. We all have a way we gravitate to doing things. When you have kids and when they start growing up, you might see their little tiny personality, under the age of 1, but that tiny seed only gets bigger and they get more independent and they get more individualized, and they're not your tiny little soldier. They are totally their own little human being. And the hardest part that I find is when they are doing something that is maybe opposite of what you envision your child to be like, or to want, or to desire. It's to not snuff that out or try to control that, but to adapt to it and try to guide it and support it. And sometimes you have to do that in the hardest moments, like when you're already overstimulated and like your kid is doing something that you're like, absolutely not, that is not cool in my mind. We're on a camping trip in the outdoors. Why are we sitting there drawing in a pad forever? To adjusting and saying, well, maybe she's drawing pictures of the leaves, which I actually haven't stopped to look at for more than 2 seconds. Whereas I think we need to all be on a hike and she wants to sit and draw the leaves. That is an equal experience, and I need to adapt myself as a mom to open the door for that to be okay. And so having that inner strength to respond to your child where they are and who they are, and to support that and let that flourish and take yourself out of the equation,
Right.
that's has to be the hardest part. And then also not just remove yourself, but sometimes completely change yourself so that you can best support that kid. So I mentioned those parenting styles before. I've had to tap into different ones at different times. Almost none of them are authentic to me. I'm just a lover. Like, I just want to like be kind all the time. That's just what I would rather do, But when you're raising a child, especially certain children with very strong will, sometimes that's not enough. And you need to put on some armor, and you got to try out different styles, and you got to do different things and change yourself and adapt. And then even though it's so hard for you, you watch your kid and you're like, wow, they're responding. And it's so positive. You're like, I'm willing to do this all the time. It's super uncomfortable, and you'll do it. And it might be hard. You might feel like you're losing parts of yourself along the way, but you're always there. You're shining. They know you, you're there. So yeah, when it comes to motherhood and postpartum and taking care of babies, that's where I find that long-term 3-kid mom, mama, jamma, long-term challenge is for me anyhow.
Man, I love it. Well, I feel like we could go on forever and ever and ever. We've covered so much today. My final question, Jules, is what's one thing you wish your mom would have told you about motherhood?
Ooh, I like that.
Oh, what do I wish my mom told me?
Or
Um,
communicated.
yeah. Let's see.
Picturing your mom right now.
Oh gosh. She had a lot to say. So I'm trying to think of something that my mom did not say, to be totally frank with you. Let's see. I think she would say, I wish my mom is full of really good advice, really exceptional advice, and it's been great. But sometimes I might have fallen a little bit into that category of the kid who had all the advice all the time. So when I all of a sudden was left to figure things out on my own, I wasn't very confident in it. So I think if there was something she could tell me is, you have all the tools, you have the ability, you are the perfect mom for this kid. You can't go wrong. Look at that kid, trust yourself, trust your heart, and do what feels best for you, and cancel out all the other noise. You'll be fine.
I love it. And so with all our listeners out here, what do you think is one thing you wish you could just tell them all about motherhood? One thing. You can only boil it down to one.
Oh my gosh.
Thing
okay. Yes.
That you're like, you need to know this.
Okay. I am looking at my notes because this is important. If you're asking a mom of 3 kids, one thing to tell them, you know, I think we've touched on it a lot, so I'm not going to like put the, what is that? Nail in the coffin, horse's mouth, all those, whatever it is. But the way I would say it is, I would say, when it comes down to it, when you're in that difficult moment, when you're looking at your kid, look at them, literally just look at them, whether it's in the eyes, whether it's their body, their mannerisms. Look at your child, sit with yourself, soul search a little bit, find your gut, and go with that. And don't be afraid that it might be the wrong choice, because I truly believe that research and articles and other people's advice has a much higher chance of leading you down the wrong path than actually relying on yourself and your true child that's sitting there in front of you. So if you listen to their gut, meet that child's needs directly where they are, not trying to push them to where you want them to be, and support them, I think that that's probably the best lesson I would share with anybody is, in the end, we have all the tools. They're right here.
Yeah.
You're ready to be a mom.
I love it. Well, with that amazing sentiment, I'm going to say, Jules, thanks so much for being on our podcast. And listeners, thanks so much for spending your time with us. Cheers to everyone. Cheers to raising mama.
Cheers.
Raising each other up and raising a little hell. Come and tune in for next week. See ya. Bye.
Thanks, Julie. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Raising Mama podcast. Your presence means a lot, and we hope you found our discussion insightful.
To become a part of our community, follow us on Instagram at Raising Mama Podcast. Explore resources on the Raising Mama Village located at www.raisingmama.com.
You're never alone on this motherhood journey. We're here to support you every step of the way.